And by the way, speaking of hazardous, the president's words, the president's assurances about this pandemic, it's hazardous to your health. You can't listen because, again, he's predicted time and again, starting in January, that this was going to magically go away, that the Chinese were being transparent, that it'd magically go away in April, that it was one person, soon it'd be 0 people. I mean, you know, in April, we lost as many people as were lost during the Vietnam War, fighting in the Vietnam War, U.S. troops. Pretty soon, Matt Lewis yesterday tweeted this. I thought it was chilling. Pretty soon, more Americans will die from this pandemic that Donald Trump told African-American leaders back in February would magically go away. More Americans are going to soon be dead from this pandemic than were killed in the Battle of Britain. British civilians who died in the Battle of Britain against the Nazis in 1940. More Americans will be dead from this pandemic that Donald Trump said was nothing to worry about, time and time again. And so, as we've said all along, I mean, I'm a Baptist. I believe in late life conversions, even if we're talking about a pandemic. Keep waiting for the president to wake up, grow up, be responsible, and he just can't do it. And instead of working through the weekend, he was rage tweeting. Instead of working last night, he was rage tweeting. And this is one of the things that he was rage tweeting against. Again, the truth. He rage tweets against the truth. Let's take a look.
There's mourning in America. Today, more than 60,000 Americans have died from a deadly virus Donald Trump ignored. With the economy in shambles, more than 26 million Americans are out of work, the worst economy in decades. Trump bailed out Wall Street, but not Main Street. This afternoon, millions of Americans will apply for unemployment, and with their savings run out, many are giving up hope. Millions worry that a loved one won't survive COVID-19. There's mourning in America, and under the leadership of Donald Trump, our country is weaker and sicker and poorer. And now, Americans are asking, if we have another 4 years like this, will there even be an America?
Paid for by the Lincoln Project, which is responsible for the content of this advertising.
You know, David Ignatius, for those of us who are old enough to remember the original Morning in America ad in 1984, a completely different time, but I think what's so chilling about that ad and all of these type ads that come out, that by the time they drop the ad, the numbers are old. They mentioned 60,000 people dead, and an ad just dropped. We're going to be up to 70,000 dead in the next day or so. You put out, I remember people putting out ads talking about 3,000 people dead. Within a week, it seemed like it had doubled. Like this is, and we're hearing from the government that this is going to exponentially get worse, that by June the 1st, the number of deaths per day is actually going to double. And even against that backdrop, even against all of the lies and the false assurances the president has given senior citizens, have given the elderly, have given the physically impaired, have given the rest of us who have family members who have underlying conditions, even with all those lies and false assurances, he's still at it, saying don't trust this CDC draft that was made with the help of FEMA. Basically, all the people on my task force in my government, don't trust that. And he's trying to push people back out to open up their businesses before they meet not my guidelines, not your guidelines, not Mika's guidelines, not Nancy Pelosi's guidelines, not Bernie Sanders' guidelines, not like the American Marxist League's guidelines, Donald Trump's guidelines, his own White House guidelines. He's not even following his own guidelines. And it's gotten so frightening that even a lot of his close allies are now condemning people that are going to rallies with guns and trying to intimidate legislators. This is a president who isolates himself more, not only from reality, but from a lot of supporters, David.
Joe, that line, "It's morning in America" with the somber music, as we think back on this horrifying month of April that we've just lived through as a country, is really painful for all of us. We want to be looking forward. We want to have some sense of how we're all going to come out of this. We look to the president for that kind of leadership. On the numbers, he doesn't know what the numbers are going to be. These are simulations and models. It's less that bothers me, that the numbers change. That happens. It's that what the country desperately needs is leadership to mobilize the resources of government that are there. And on the key issues of testing, tracing, even moving toward therapies, that leadership still seems to be lacking. I had a chance this week to talk with the CEO of Ford Motor Company, who's trying as hard as he can to keep his business going, keep his workers safe and employed. And what amazed me, Joe, was that he just said, we're having to do this all by ourselves. We made a 70-page booklet about how to reopen production as soon as we can, and we've got all the best practices. I said, so are you getting guidance from above? What agency do you talk to? Well, we don't talk to any agency. There's nobody really there. We're sharing with other companies. So we're a dispersed, disorganized country craving leadership and not getting it. Again, we're going to have Morning in America as our theme for some months now, and I just worry that we're going to begin to really tear the threads of the country apart in this period because people are frightened. They want government. They want to blame somebody for their difficulty. So it's a terrible period. The one thing we say is we know it will change at some point and get better.
Well, let us hope and pray. But Mika, without Washington, without the president running this crisis, he said he was a war president. This was a war. It's like he's putting 50 militias out there, state militias, and saying, you decide how you're going to fight World War II. Yeah. You decide, you 50 governors decide how you're going to land on Omaha Beach and scale the cliffs, liberate Normandy, and liberate the rest of Europe. You figure it out on your own. And in this case, where every state's on their own, every company like Ford are on their own, you don't have a government official, you don't have a government agency talking about best practices when Ford calls up and say, well, you know, it's interesting you're asking that question. We have actually a manufacturer out in Nevada that did this. Also, your business might be more like the one in Washington State, in Seattle. They did these practices. You may want to give them a call. Here's the booklet that they sent out. We'll send you a PDF. You can look it over and talk to your executives. Or, hey, here's what they're doing in Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, without that, it is literally every man for himself, every woman for himself, every governor for themselves. And this is instead just a president who's been lying to the American people, who's been telling the American people from the start that this was just one person from China, it was going to go away. This was just 11 people. Soon it's going to be down to 0. This was just 15 people. Soon it's going to be down to 5 and probably 0. That this is going to go away magically in April.
All night long.
It's going to go away like magic. This is a guy that said, hey, you know what? Try hydroxychloroquine or whatever it is. Kept rambling on and on and on about that until his own government agencies had to say, don't take that. It causes heart damage.
And then he
Consult your doctor. And so then, yes, the next day he moved to disinfectants. He moved to putting lights inside of people. Then the government had to say, don't do that. This will cause danger. The same week, Mika, he was saying, I don't think this is going to come back in the fall. This may not even come back in the fall. It's, of course, to the scientists and the doctors, to the nurses, that was the same thing as the president saying it was going to magically go away in April. And now he's doubting the CDC. Now he's doubting FEMA. Now he's doubting drafts of reports. Well, we can look at the University of Washington report that's just in the past 3 weeks has doubled the number, the estimate for the number of Americans who are going to die from this, from like 60,000 to 135,000. And this is a president whose false assurances are hazardous to your health, especially if you're a senior, especially if you're a family member who has loved ones that have underlying conditions. Please be careful. Please take care of yourself. The president is detached from reality.
Well, and it's honestly safe to say that if you listen to this president and you do as he says or takes his advice, that very much could be hazardous to your health and even deadly. And Katy, beyond the fact that I think even, somebody who perhaps, voted for Trump can see with their own eyes that he's not focused on this. When he's tweeting through the night about cable hosts or whatever, not the virus. And when he's saying things like put disinfectant into your body, you get a sense that perhaps he's not focused. Can you imagine the potential if a President Bush or an Obama had to take the reins? They may not be perfect, but there would be collaboration between major companies that actually produces concepts and ideas and moves forward quickly. There would be collaboration between all the governors and all the states. There would be the use of the Defense Production Act to streamline the process. We would be in a very different place, for sure. There are so many and growing numbers of experts, especially in the science and medical fields, who believe that we have wasted valuable time doing nothing or not enough or the wrong thing in terms of dealing with this virus. But what's fascinating to me is that the United States usually helps other countries. We usually go in and we're the solution. And at this point, the United States of America, especially given these new numbers, is still very much at its knees. The UK is doing badly as well, but the messaging there from its leader, very different.
Yeah, and look, yesterday we had a global conference, virtual global conference on vaccine experimentation, and the big country that wasn't there was the United States. All the European countries were there. China had a representative there too, but the US didn't even attend that conference. I don't see what they had to lose by going and having a presence. Why not collaborate on something as urgent as this? But they weren't there. I mean, I think we are in a really critical couple of weeks right now. And that's why the modeling is changing so dramatically and so much for the worse. Because as we start to move around, and we know from GPS cell data that people are starting to move around in the US. I mean, I've felt it. I can hear, sitting in my backyard in Washington, I can hear the noise of traffic again. I wasn't hearing that 2 weeks ago. And what we need above all right now is clarity of message from the top. We need to be told, we know you want to go outside. We know the weather is getting warmer. We know you're fed up with being inside. But we ask you, for the sake of yourself and your families and those you love and for everyone else, please do not move. Please do not go back outside, because that is when we are going to see these numbers really spike. And right from the beginning, the message we've had from the White House is ambivalence. On the one hand, the president will say, here are the guidelines, stick to the guidelines. On the other, he'll say, but I'm not wearing a mask. Or he'll say, yeah, but you want to get back to work. Yes, but these are good people who are out there protesting. Yes, but let's liberate Virginia and Minnesota and Michigan. I mean, that kind of mixed messaging, sort of giving with one hand but taking away with the other, is exactly the wrong kind of messaging for this moment, where we're on a kind of precipice right now and we're looking over for the next 2 weeks. If we open up, we're going to see the numbers double, as we've just seen from those modeling. And we can choose not to, but we need, as individuals, it's a normal human thing for us to want to get back outside into the parks and to get back outside into shops and to get back outside. So we really need that leadership right now more than ever to say, no, this is very clear. Here's the clarity of the message. You cannot do that right now for the sake of you and your loved ones. You can't go back outside. And I have to say, when I look around Europe now, the message is clear. It's not clear here in the United States from the top.
It'll be interesting to see from the top, as Kathy says, when the president goes to Arizona today and visits an N95 manufacturing plant. Will he, in fact, wear a mask himself? Mike Pence, of course, did not wear one at the Mayo Clinic last week. Guys, I think, too, it's interesting when you hear New York, which has been the epicenter of this for a couple of months now. When you hear Governor Cuomo start to say the worst is behind us, when you see that ship leave New York City, when you see the field hospital in Central Park start to fold up, I think the rest of the country perhaps can get lulled into a false sense of security. And there's a line in that CDC report that, yes, did cross the president's desk that was delivered to the White House, where they say there remains a large number of counties whose burden continues to grow. That means when you see that New York is getting better relatively, although 226 people still died yesterday in New York, it's not over in the rest of the country. And that's the message that Drs. Fauci and Birx are trying to get out there, that okay, we've done better, we've mitigated in these places where it was worse, but it will be back, and it will visit new parts of the country if we don't remain vigilant on these questions of social distancing and people moving between states.
One, that's a great concern. If the President of the United States is giving Americans false assurances, if he's lying about this virus, if he's still trying to bully this virus, if he's spreading the lies in May that he was spreading in January and February about it magically going away, or now not magically coming back, that's dangerous to Americans' health. And no, not in New York City. You're right. New York City has figured it out. I mean, what has long been my fear, beyond New York City, of course, which just was horrific, was what happened when this got into, the area where I've lived most of my life. What happens when it gets outside of New York, gets off of the East Coast, gets into the Central Time Zone? What you find is that you find an older population. Demographics are trend older in rural America. The hospitals, I've talked to hospital administrators, people that are running rural hospitals across middle America. They're scared to death. They don't have the capacity to handle patients coming in. Some only have 1 or 2 ventilators in their entire hospital. They've been gutted over the past 5 to 10 years by Medicaid cuts that Republicans passed, thinking that they were being responsible. Now it's their own hospitals in red state America in many places that are ill-equipped to handle even the slightest of surges. And that's what concerns me about the coronavirus coming to middle America, and the president delivering a very mixed message that bluntly makes a lot of his supporters in middle America, in these areas that could be so badly affected and that are so ill-equipped to handle this virus, it's making a lot of these people still call the coronavirus a hoax. I have heard it from friends who say many of their associates still consider this to be a hoax, that it's overblown, that it's just not the case. That's deadly thinking.
Yes.
And that's thinking that's been promoted by the president and his allies. And we ask again that the president of the United States starts listening to his doctors, starts telling the truth, and starts following the White House guidelines. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.